Welcome to Oliver's Quest. Tonight's story takes us to the Andremedan Council, concerned about the possibilities of open hostilities breaking into galactic battle. The Andremedans arranged for a summit to be held upon the great city in the fantastic realm. The primary concerns involved the Limerians, the Sirians, and the scientific fleets of the Arturians, as well as the Orions. The leaders of those realms were invited until the fantastic kingdom, and the entire realm was buzzing with great anticipation. Edward, along with Captain Marcos of the Andremedan city ship the Pristine, had studied the operations underway at the hands of Kruk and the Limerians, whose operation was presented as a multilateral science project involving the big four powers, backed by each kingdom's scientific specialties. The Andremedans had been watching the fantastic kingdom for some time, having seen great potential, so much potential that they considered it a very special project. The fantastic kingdom was actually the treasure of the Andremedans themselves. They considered them their prodigy, as if they were their chosen child. And now, scientific experimentations at the hands of trusted parties had seemingly overstepped their bounds, or for whatever reason, peril was the result. The great four powers, the Arturians, masters of sound and energy, and of course, the Limerians, fierce warriors and traders, and prolific in the sciences of mechanical energy and magnetism. The Limerians were the workers, the aggressive ones, who performed very many heroic deeds and were well respected in most realms. The Orions, experts in thermal dynamics and kinetic energy concepts, always to be emulated. And finally, the Sirians, famous for their emerald chariots that can outmaneuver any and all, and shrewd politicians as well. Here on the fantastic realm, the fantastic kingdom, the most miraculous ones, the first to mold fantasy and time into a vibrant and diverse culture. It was a jewel of the Andremedan collection of civilizations, all of them their children, and all of them cherished, but none perhaps more so than the fantastic kingdom. They were very dexterous and very inquisitive, and learned things of magnificent, almost incomprehensible complexities. They were sociable, and they worked together to build the most interesting and most vibrant kingdom that the Andremedans had under their crowns of kingdoms. The fantastic realm, the true jewel of the Andremedan Council. They so very much loved all the creatures of this environment, especially the men and the women who were to guide the rest and lead the way and show the entire galactic system that as much as they have done in the fantastic kingdom, they would do even greater things than ever done before. And it was done by sticking together and following some simple rules. And this fantastic realm, although for centuries and eons thrived, was in peril because of the lassitude of some powerful creatures. The Limerians were the first to abandon the principles of oneness and broke away from the Andremedan guidelines. They managed to continue their self-absorbed path using technicalities upon the great principles. They retained status of an approved realm, although they detested the Andremedans' ways, until at one point they began to resent them and their immense authority. The Assyrians were allied with the Limerians out of utter necessity. The Sirians needed the practical, mechanical expertise of the fierce and outgoing Limerians. However, the Sirians made it clear who ruled who, and they became aggressive and destructive and cared not what they destroyed. Highly influenced by this once prominent leader, the trusted one, Arturius, who was the very first to defy the oneness that held everything and everything at all together. Arturius was the favored child of the Andremedans. He was given all, and nothing was withheld. But somewhere, he lost the value of the principles and decided to become very self-absorbed and only worried about his own power and his own ways, to the point that his crimes could not be ignored. And he was sent to the catacombs beneath the fantastic realm for his eventual court session. In the meantime, the Andremedans had conceived of an alternative, someone who could match the gifts of Arturus. It was Medici with whom the Andremedans conceived. Medici understood the principles of oneness to the point that he studied the entire creation to its smallest levels until he understood and then progressed to the higher. He devoted his entire eternal existence to understand what he must know. For to rule all, he must know all. And to know all, well, that might take some time, especially if you haven't to learn it rather than simply create it. The Andremedans, the fathers of all the creations, understood the dynamics of time, and they gave various gifts to various creatures. And the Limerians understood the mechanical technologies better than any, and time was the most mechanical, basic energy form there was. For it was the time was the fractal beginning of all. For without time, you cannot experience the now. An equilibrium of future and past balanced by the floating moment of now. And that is all that everything is and everything is there. Elsewhere, it is an illusion. But Medici had to go underground. He cannot make it aware of his accomplishments. And it was during this underground time that Medici discovered Oliver, the field mouse, the one who was open to all. And Medici taught Oliver all he knew, and he was his one and only protege. But for now, the Andremedans are bringing their military might into the very surface of the fantastic realm, under accusations of preparations for war instead of science. The hearings on the Andromeda Council were sufficient enough to warrant a military presence, and Captain Marco led the way in the city ship the Pristine, mainly to monitor the Limerians, who were crafting a magnificent potential energy device that could possibly change the entire dynamics of the universe. The project was very aggressive, and with the help of the Sirians, they had made great progress. But it was because of the protest of Edward, and the attention to the fantastic realm was brought to the presence of the Andremedans. And now they see that it is much, much different than they had imagined, having trusted the watchers of the worlds to inform them. Now they see it's on the brink of utter destruction. The Andremedans had one rule for all their creations, that while all are each other and individual as they come, they're still together, and all is one. And to separate themselves from this unity would ultimately be a disaster, and the Andremedans wanted all their children to live their entire lives in full, without fear, and to reach their entire potential. But fighting and destruction could not be part of the plan. And the Andremedans were hurrying to the fantastic realm, and it prepared for the summit of peace and the summit of discussion. And when it was all over, perhaps the unity, the togetherness, as well as the inspiration and the absolute total imagination of all of its creatures to achieve its maximum potential would not fall to the dustbin. And the Andromedan Council had gathered on this very eve, and before the sun would rise to its position, the four powers, Edward and the Andremedans, would meet in one summit to hopefully come to some reasonable peace in all these matters. It was the watchful eye, the eye of the Andromedan creators, who conceived all the creatures in all the worlds and all the realms. And today they saw trouble, and only Edward and Oliver and a few others could help.